Wynton Marsalis is an American jazz trumpeter. He was born in New Orleans in 1961. So his father played piano and taught piano. And when Wynton was six, um, his father was sat at a table with Al Hurt, Miles Davis, and Clark Terry. So I've only actually heard of Miles Davis out of those three, and joked that he should get a trumpet for Miles so that he could, for Wynton, so that he could fit in with the others. And Al Hurt gave him one. He started playing it at age 12, and as he got older, his ambition was to be a classical trumpeter. However, in 1980, he joined Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers, and so in 1982 decided to switch from classical to jazz. And he's won awards for both jazz and classical music. Uh, Famously, he was vocally against the electric instruments, and therefore the jazz that developed from the Miles Davis kind of electric era and jazz rock and fusion and those things. Once when Miles Davis met him, he said, "Here comes the police." He's also been vocal about other kinds of music. I love his quote about hip hop. He said that it reinforces destructive behavior at home and influences the world's view of the Afro American in a decidedly negative direction, which I would say is spot on. Um, he's as a jazz musician, he's got a typically huge discography, and it's also worth noting that his three brothers, Branford, Jason, and Del Feo, are all also jazz musicians. Hi, my name's Dan. So this album by Wynton Marsalis was released in 1985. So a lot of the jazz that we've been looking at, or I've been looking at, listening to over this series of reviews has been from the 50s or from the 60s. Um, so it's quite unusual to have a jazz album from 1985 popping up here. Um, we've got, I want to mention, as well as Wynton on the trumpet, so there's Branford Marsalis, his brother, plays saxophone and soprano saxophone. There's a guy called Kenny Kirkland playing piano here. There's also bass and drums. But the reason why I've highlighted Branford Marsalis and Kenny Kirkland is because the following year after this, they went and recorded an album with a rock musician by the name of Sting called Dream of the Blue Turtles, which was hugely successful and won awards for its jazz, despite it being a rock album, which Sting apparently thought was ridiculous. But quite a bit of that is down to these two guys, Branford Marsalis and Kenny Kirkland, who appeared heavily on that album. Anyway, back to this album. So it is jazz. It's all instrumental stuff. I find it hard sometimes to describe exactly. I don't have the words. If I don't have the words, it means that possibly, unless you're a jazz specialist, you might not understand the words if I had them anyway. So let's just try and use normal language. So definitely jazz. It's quite complex at times, not always. Sometimes it's quite wandering around in terms of not hitting recognizable tunes. So it's got a certain amount of freedom to the improvisation that's going on here, but it's got a strange quality that doesn't remind me of other jazz that I've heard. Certainly from the 50s, it certainly doesn't remind me of modal jazz or of free jazz. In some ways, it's more tuneful, but again, I'm struggling to explain why. It feels like, despite um, Wynton Marsalis's dislike of jazz rock and fusion, that actually there's been some influence from that coming in here, because it feels like it has, even though it doesn't use rock instruments, it feels like it has a bit of that kind of fusion, kind of prog rock almost at times feel to it. Um, just at times. Maybe this leaning in it is why I found it more accessible, because I've listened to loads of prog rock in the past. There's a lot of different speeds and feels going on here. There's some really nice playing, especially like the soprano sax, which is Branford Marsalis. All almost always like a soprano sax. It sounds amazing. Um, but my favourite track is the last track, which is just called Blues, and it's just a bass and a trumpet. And there's some really nice playing from both the bass and the trumpet in it. And there's an amazing note in it, which is just one long trumpet note that lasts for 20 odd seconds. I don't play trumpet. I know enough to know that this sounds like a really hard note to play. Anyway, I liked it. And I'd love to know what you think of this album. So please talk to me through the comments box. That's it from me for now.